Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the moon in Scorpio 2. I'm joined here today by my good friend, CV Henry. How are you doing today, CV?
Good. How are you? I hope I am not choppy.
I'm hanging in there. Yeah, we're a few technical like being difficulties at the beginning, but hopefully we've got it all worked out. So let us know in the chat if we're coming through or if we're bit like this today. just just giving CB a heart attack. Sorry. This is just a little scorpionic humor for the day. Let us know in the chat box where you're all stopping in from. I see we've got Lisa already saying hi. We've got Mr. Hindsight from San Francisco stopping by. Dimfy's here from the Netherlands. Thank you, Lisa, for the super chat. If you want to support the work that we do here, you can hit that little $ button in the chat. You can do a super chat or a super sticker. We can ask a question that'll be highlighted. If you just want to make a donation, that's a great way to support the work that we do here. So we're going to be talking about this new moon in Scorpio 2 that happens on the 4th of November. But first, CV, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you have going on in your astrological proclivities.
Yeah, so I am a writer and astrologer based mostly out of Detroit, reporting from New Jersey today. And yeah, I'm a consulting astrologer and I do a monthly sun sign column, well, actually rising signs horoscopes for Supernatural Lingerie. So I write every month for
Nice.
public consumption.
And you're
Yeah.
also a graduate of the Nightlight astrology program as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where we met.
Yeah.
She's another alumni. Really get some great and some friends through that program and was able to meet a lot of people that were passionate about astrology. So it's great to be able to continue the conversation here on the live streams. All right. So where can we find you right away here? Where's all your
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, sure. I'm under Art of the Zodiac. So CV Henriette, my more personal stuff. And then yeah, Art of the Zodiac on Instagram, Art of the Zodiac on Facebook. Send me an email if you want. CV at artofthezodiac.co.
Nice. .co,
I think I
not
covered it.
.com. So
.co, not
some
com. Yeah.
that you leave the M off the end there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And just to wrap up sort of our initial thoughts here. If you're new to this channel, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and the like button can really help us to get the algorithm out to more and more people. I do have a webinar that's coming up, the Decans of Scorpio, on the 13th of November. That's going to be a Saturday around 1:00 p.m. So we're going to talk some Scorpio archetypes today, but if you want a real deep dive into all three decans of Scorpio, the myths associated with it, some of the planetary associations, tarot, that's a great place to start. And you can find a link to that in the video description below. And we have a deal going until the 1st of November where you can get 20% off. So check that out. All right. So should we dive in, CV? Any initial thoughts before we get into the nitty gritty here?
I mean, I always have lots of thoughts, so we should probably dive in before we, my ADHD takes over.
Okay. So I'll share my screen here and we will take a look at the chart of the new moon in Scorpio 2.
Okay.
We are taking a look at November the 4th, which is a Thursday at 5:14 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I was looking at when the time shifts. It's actually not till the 7th of November this year. So that's one thing that trips astrologers up every once in a while is the standard time versus daylight time. But we're not going to be falling back until the 7th. So you have a few more weeks of sleep, I guess, or whatever it is before our circadian rhythms get screwed up. And we are seeing a new moon at 12 degrees of Scorpio. And I'll run down a few details first here, and then we'll kind of pick them apart.
Okay.
So 12 degree Scorpio is on a fixed star called Alphecca, which is the crown of Ariadne. We'll dive into those myths in a minute. But the sun is in its own face. This is the decan that has the sun as a ruler, so we can kind of get some significations with that. The moon, though, is in its fall or its depression. So it's a sun that has some dignity, but a moon that's not in a place that it's super happy. And I think part of that is because of the generally the moon is about bringing things into life and manifesting form. And Scorpio has a lot of decomposition themes associated with it. It's the place where the veil between life and death is the thinnest. We have a host, Mars, that is hosting this new moon, which is by this time will have moved into Scorpio and will be very powerful. So a very powerful Mars. We've got an opposition with this new moon that is exactly opposite Uranus. And all of these Scorpio things are going to be making subsequent squares to Saturn. And I think we'll get to some squares with Jupiter, but the Saturn squares are going to be really part of the conversation of at least the week or two moving forward from this position. Tarot card is the Six of Cups. We'll break that down. And Austin Coppock calls this decan mutual distillation, which is sort of about circuits of exchange.
Oh.
All right. What do you think, CV? What do we got? What big picture thoughts? We got some details here. What are some things that they're coming up for you with this new moon in its essence?
Well, these are just sort of general Scorpio thoughts that I've been having a lot lately. I've been spending a lot of, as I mentioned, I'm in New Jersey. There's some great hiking here. I've been spending some time outdoors. And now every time I keep thinking of Scorpio season as the season of, like you said, decomposition or recycling. And I think about how there's the heaviness in Libra of like figuring out your fate to some extent, right? Like the tip into darkness. But then in Scorpio, it's like we really like embrace. And I almost think of Scorpio season as like a time of mourning and coming back to the leaves. Every time I keep seeing, right, like leaves on it's right. It's beautiful when they're on the trees and they're changing color, but this is the time of year when leaves are starting to like rot and seep back into the ground. And just thinking about Scorpio season in those terms of like, I don't know, it's an initiation, right? This new moon, but I think of like the question I keep asking myself is like, what am I recycling?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, because, when we think of life as cyclical, we have cycles of growth, we have cycles of birth, but we also have to return form the earth, right? And I think that this is something that as a culture, especially in the West, I think that we don't acknowledge quite enough or embrace enough. I think that, sort of, and maybe we can blame capitalism, maybe we can blame, I don't know, colonialism, I don't know, whatever like thing we want to blame for not having the ability to go within, to take a time out and say that, you know what, there needs to be a time to create space for death, for decomposition, for tearing down old structures rather than continually building them up. And I'm hesitating to add the second part of that, which is for future fertility, which is true. But if we skip over too quickly over the actual decay phase, then we're committing another, I guess, cardinal sin of not being in the moment. And in this moment, it is really about, release.
Not to sort of take it too far out, but walking around yesterday, it's like there's that certain sort of chill, at least this part of the world, that you get in the air when fall comes. And right, like I think that our capitalism clock is always go, 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 but there's this feeling of like this is a time of stopping, a feel like, so there's like a chill in the air that sort of feels like a certain sort of death.
Yeah.
Like, and I was thinking to myself, and again, to go out there, getting older, right? Like thinking about too, right? Like at what point in our own lives do we sort of, are we in the like Scorpio feels to me in this larger sort of macrocosm of life, like entering into middle age, like understanding that there is this now sort of focus on the decomposition, that it's not always just like the fertility might be a next life at this point.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I feel that. I think that on some level, we're both kind of in our, I don't know, do you give your age away?
Late
Like,
30s.
yeah, you're late 30s. I just turned 40 a few years ago. No, like I'm 41, but we are seeing. The thing that comes to my mind, I don't know if all of you have seen the Into the Spider-Verse. Did you see that movie?
No, but I'm looking
Oh,
at
oh
right
my God, it was so good. It was that animated Spider-Man movie with all the different multiverse Spider-Man.
now. Okay.
And in one of the multiverses, there is a Peter B. Parker who is like middle age and like he's starting
Wow.
to get a dad bod, and he's just like he's right over the hump where he's starting the descent. And
Mhm.
I'm starting to see some of those things creep up in my own experience of like becoming aware that this body, that these forms are not eternal. That doesn't mean that our essence can't be thought of as eternal in spirit, and that's another whole nother theme to unpack. But coming to the realization of the temporal nature of this material reality that we're in, um, and that's heavy. That can be very sobering on some level. And I guess one of the things I wanted to say too is I love teaching on this channel, and one of the things that I found um, about Mars in particular is those two Mars ruled signs, Aries, and you're an Aries sun, so you can kind of speak to this. Uh, those two Aries, or sorry, those two Mars ruled signs, they really are about severing and separating, but for different purposes.
Yeah.
In Aries, it's severing from the mother collective to say, I am not this. I am this. I infuse into a solar consciousness with like with the exaltation of the sun being in Aries. It's kind of a combo. But when we look at Scorpio, it is pure Mars. It's pure, like we are separating from consciousness from the body now to return spirit to that collective. And that realization to me has really completely turned on my head the understanding of those two signs in particular. What do you think? How do you utilize Mars? You have a strong Mars in your chart too. Speak a little bit about Mars energy for me here.
Well, it's interesting because I think about that a lot, and I think you put it really succinctly. Like I know as someone who has Sun in Aries, Mars in Aries on the midheaven, like I'm very aware of the energy of cutting and
Mhm.
being right. Like the dark side of being selfish is something that I have to like think about and a lot, because there's this like forge ahead, like at any means necessary. Like I want to do something, like we're going right. It's a very like that
Yeah.
cutting, right? Like cutting, you draw blood. And then like, but I'm always sort of amazed because Mars in Scorpio is such a different energy, right? And it almost talking about like
Yeah.
decomposition. It's like now we're like dividing and severing to return to something. There's that like, it's now like, whereas Mars and Aries is that very like diurnal, like forward motion into the day, starting something. This is the initiating the process of descent, of going into the underworld, of figuring out like what how you separate things for that decomposition, right? Because there's still a severing
Yeah.
process in that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, but you really put it succinctly.
Yeah. Mars being um it wants something, right? It's always like trying to create movement, speed, like heat on some level too. So I like the thought that the ground heats up in both seasons of spring and fall. You know, it heats up for the process of fecundity and growth in the
Hmm.
spring. And those same microbes, or maybe slightly different ones, sort of heat up in fall to be able to break down. They create heat through the breaking down process. I did actually, I did a deep dive on this process, the decomposition like scientific process recently, as I was doing some more research for Scorpio, and it's really actually quite fascinating. Like I've said before that as a Taurus moon, Cancer sun, death isn't something that I've been super excited about or like comfortable with.
Yeah.
Um, I've always tried to kind of avoid it because I think that a lot of my energy is given towards facilitating healthy growth and nurturing.
Hmm.
But this is so different. It was really interesting to see. They had a dead animal. They had an experiment where they were seeing type of bacteria would start breaking it down, what type of insects and things like that. And I thought it was super fascinating that the bacteria in the stomach starts to escape the stomach. And I'm going to stop my share here because I want to show you these cards for Scorpio. You know, so we have Scorpio with the Five of Cups, the morning card. But this one's called hunger, and that reminded me of the microbes that are escaping the stomach lining that are then starting to consume, like a jawbone, which Austin calls this deck in, the rest of the body, which is that's fascinating to me. And then as we get to the Scorpio 2 deck and where this new moon is at, there is themes of a chemical transformation. It's a solar decan. We have a Mars decan, a solar
Yeah.
decan, and a Venus decan. And T. Susan Chang really put this really interestingly about that Mars, Sun, Venus process that we also see in Aries. That those are actually the same decanic order for the rulers of Aries. So
Yeah.
separation, achemical transformation, and then attraction. Okay, so I feel like Scorpio 2 is that achemical transformation where the bacteria has spread and it's now like releasing these gases, and then there's this union of like flies and worms that are starting to like consume everything, and it's creating this bloat, and eventually in Scorpio 3 you've got like a desiccated shell that's just blackened, and there's hair and like bones, and that's what's left. It's just a ghost of a former being. And there's a lot of themes of chasing old forms that aren't, you know, even valid anymore in that decan. So I just thought that was really interesting, that Mars, Sun, Venus order that we're going through in Scorpio, and sort of the alchemy process that we can see with this. Because I do think we're heading towards, there is hope in this. I don't want it to be super like negative throughout the whole process, because every process can be beautiful. And the next process we get to is Sagittarius afterwards, where there is enthusiasm. It says, my spirit has been released from this body. I need to find a new chariot. You know, I need to find a
Yeah.
new vehicle, right? You know what I'm saying?
I love that. And not, yeah. And I don't think this is depressing, to sort of going back to this whole thing. I know we talked about age and sort of we're like, oh, we're
Mm,
decomposing. But
yeah.
I think the beauty of thinking about the season, like thinking about the zodiacal seasons, right, on top of the seasons of one's life, is it gives us time to prepare, right? So if we
Right,
use Scorpio season, understanding we're not going to be around forever,
right.
this is a really good time to start having a healthy relationship to death, to think about what this feels like, to go on this mini journey of Sun, Mars, Venus, right? Like this is something we can experience with intention so that the aging process itself becomes easier.
I love that. I love that. Because, you know, there's many spiritual traditions, you know, like you're saying, that when you have an awareness of your death, you know, that's really helping you stay in the moment and appreciate what you're going through and what you're experiencing. I mean, sometimes when you know that something is limited, that you're just like, okay, I'm not going to live forever. You know, let's really be present, you know, and appreciate this day. Um, I want to get your thoughts because you do tarot, and I was really liking T. Susan Chang's take on this card. This is the Six of Cups.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about your thoughts about this card in particular, and then maybe I'll add some little details from T. Susan Chang that I thought were really really nice.
Wow, it's funny. So I'm not like a tarot expert at all, but that's probably too. Whenever I think of tarot, it's generally within the context of what's around it to some extent, right? But I don't know. I think of this card to me
Yeah.
feels like the almost like a looking ahead in a sense, right? Like this understanding, right? Of like, what is the end result? I think of just immediately the end result of the decomposition, right? It's the understanding that we need to go through this process of decay to regenerate, right? To me, this is like the whole experience in a card.
Yeah, like the passing on of wisdom or something to the
Exactly,
next
like the passing of the
generation,
baton, right?
right?
Like this, it's just saying that, like, yes, why are we doing this? We are recycling matter now so that it can make way for something new.
Hmm.
And perhaps that's a simplistic read. I'd love to know. So I throw my cards around. T. Susan
No,
Chan,
I
I've read
think
it once, but
you're hitting the point pretty well. Like I think of it in a couple ways because one theory that I've kind of formulated is connecting these tarot decans with the Thema Mundi, and the Thema Mundi place for Scorpio is the fifth house,
yeah,
which is all about pursuit of pleasure and desire, but also children and legacies, because it is the house that succeeds the fourth angle. It's called a succeedent house. And that means that it is what comes after the fourth house experience. So think about fourth house. They did think about fourth house as death, as an entrance into the underworld for the judgment of a life well lived. Um, and then we see what is the past. Who's going to mourn us after we're dead? Like, and then we're going to pass on these memories. I think that memory is a nice word for this.
yeah,
I think that, the nostalgia is another way we can think about this. T. Susan Chang made a really great point about this being a solar decan and the concept of the golden hour, right? Where it's the setting sun, where everything takes on this beautiful glow, right? Where things are in the process of being turned from awareness into memory and into past. So like this, she may had this really neat image about like if this card should be like cracked, because this image is not necessarily an image that is in present. It is maybe looking back on the moment of giving flowers or something like that. And she also made a point of talking about putting flowers on a grave site type of thing, like sort of a coming together for remembrance of something in the past. Right? So
yeah.
I think that a couple little like word plays here. Nostalgia has a couple root words: notos, which means to return, and algos, which means pain. So this translates to the pain of return. So it's what's really funny about. We usually think of nostalgia as something like nice, but it is tinged with a little bit of like, oh, heartache, right? For the things that have gone by, I thought that was a neat kind of take on this whole thing. We're also heading into a period of time. November 1st was associated with a cross holiday called Samhain, which is, sort of when the veil is thin between life and death. There is a lot of ancestor worship that happens around this period of time, where we're trying to make sure that we remember the people in our family in the past, but also kind of feed the hungry spirits so that they don't create havoc in our life on some level. And that's part of some of the Halloween mythology as well. And I talked to, go ahead. Yeah.
No, no, sorry. I just wanted to, that was a funny interjection to going on the, I was thinking about this memory, right? And so looking at the Six of Cups, and of course, my forward thinking Mars and Aries is like, hope, future, let's go, right? But it's so like Scorpio, right? To be like memory, like a stepping back, because it is part of, right? It's all sort of part of the same sort of time circle, but like you making space for that is um yeah, I think that's a really sort of important distinction to think about that, right? Like what is it when we're always sort of going forward, but then there is a sort of pain in having to look back sometimes. I think about that, right? Like when you get older, you sit with your memories, the good ones perhaps there's a longing for and an understanding you can't return, right? Like that feels very Saturn to me right now, right? Like you can't, like I can't return to that form, say as it's me as a child or something like this, but just or regrets or all of these things that sort of come out of that. But I don't know. I thought that was a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, it is painful sometimes to look back and to be able to contextualize things, you know, in the narrative of our life. And but you know, I'm really starting to respect these malefic planets and the roles that they play in our life. Um, if we were just to hang on to old form, there'd be no room for, you know, the new. There'd be no room for becoming the new version of ourselves too, right? There's other themes like that come up in Austin Kopek's book about desire with Scorpio. You know, Mars is saying, I'm like you were saying, I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to do it. I want this, right? And I think it is similar. I think Aries is more like I want to be me. You know, like I want this now and I want to be myself, and screw you if you're getting in my way. I'm going to fight you. Like, but
And
Scorpio's right.
oh no, no, just
Yeah,
to
go
add to
ahead.
that, think of it too, right? Like it Aries is like the spark of life. It's first. So it's all
Hmm.
potential, right? There's this like
Right.
optimism in a sense, because it's like, I can do whatever. This is the beginning. And when you have that backwards of Scorpio, suddenly you're faced with history to work with, which is a much different feeling.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a desire for the past. If you think about it
Mhm.
in those two
Yeah.
paradoxical ways, I'm almost thinking that all the water signs really have sort of a sense of longing. I like that word that you were using, longing. I mean, Cancer, as a Cancer sun myself, I understand this longing for union, for growth, for the Ouroboros mother that, like Liz Green would say, where you want to return to spirit. Scorpio is returning or is longing for some kind of deep emotional union. And I see that union as the coming together of forces, but for the purpose of release, which is interesting and something I hadn't really made the connection with in the past. And then Pisces sort of has this longing for, I don't know, just the matrix, like the net of spirituality, like of a, you know, I don't know, union with universal substance or universal consciousness on some level, like through our imaginations and through
Yeah.
things like that. Can you see that connection? Does that sort of work, you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm I'm totally ADD, and we were talking about this. Sorry, is it on
Yeah, no
sequitur?
worries.
I was just thinking of how I'm going to go home now and reread the waste. I think it's the Wasteland that starts with April is the cruelest month. And I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
Aries, the cruelty of Aries. Sorry. And it popped out because there's a line mixing memory and desire. And then I was thinking about how is there a connection with desire and memory sort of intrinsically?
Yeah. I'm looking in the chat
Yeah.
here. Um, so Wasteland is, what, tell me, T.S.
T.S.
Eliot?
Eliot. Yeah, it
There you
starts
go.
with April is the cruelest month.
Nice.
Next out is
Nice.
Deadland.
We're
The
using
Dead Land.
our English degrees here again. um, so Gail is saying that she just turned 60. Well, congratulations, Gail. You've outlived us all here, except for Mr. Hindsight is 82. Wow, we got some some elders here that were bringing us all sorts of wisdom and giving us maybe a different perspective from our even from our middle age one, which is very
Yeah.
cool. I'm very happy to see multi generations here. It's it's a really interesting crowd that shows up for these. Like it's very diverse, international. It's cross generational, and that's I hope that's the kind of welcoming environment that I'm creating here. So really appreciate all you being here. Um, Lisa's talking about "Memory" by Barbara Streisand, right? Yeah, like
Ooh.
cats.
Cats, T.S.
Anything,
Eliot
anything
wrote
with
the book.
cats.
Sorry, I got excited. We brought it all
There
together.
you go.
T.S. Eliot wrote Cats.
Right. There you go. It's all coming full circle. um, Mr. Hindsight is asking if any of us can say something about the new moon being via combust. Yeah, that wasn't something that came up in my mind, but that's a good point. Via combust is a part of the zodiac, between 15 degrees of Libra and 15 degrees of Scorpio, that is called the burned road or the burnt road, where not much comes of place. And I think that, I guess my thought on that, this new moon being there, is it is opposite Uranus if we're in a more modern context. So there's some shocks. The first thought I had about the via combust, though, is that we have a Venus retro up pretty soon, and something that may be given at this new moon view. So I think that, yeah, and I'll get into this when we talk about this chart. Let's go back to showing about here. And can everybody hear me okay? Because my connection is a little weird.
You're
I'm
getting a
hoping
little
I'm
choppy.
not
Am I choppy too?
popping in. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a bummer. So hopefully, if I get too choppy in the chat, just tell me and I'll repeat something. So apologize for that. So we are area right here, this new moon.
Yeah.
Area that Mr. Hindsight here. Middle of Libra to the middle of Scorpio. And I think that that's a great point, because you're getting a doorway into a couple of the other themes with this moon here. So the second decan of Scorpio, right on the fixed star Alphecca, associated with the story of Ariadne. And so if we go into the myth here, Ariadne was a princess, I believe Crete, and she helped Theseus, who came from Athens, to kill the Minotaur in the maze that was made by Daedalus. And Ariadne fell in love with Theseus like right away and was like, I'm going to help you get out of this unsolvable maze by giving you string so you can find your way back out. And so she helped him out. So you can see there's one theme of like a helper, like coming together for a sort of purpose. Yeah. But then eventually she left with Theseus, and then he was like, for some reason, that's sort of a mystery, left her on this island. Maybe because he had a dream. There's some theories that he had a dream of Dionysus telling him like, this is going to be my. He had other interests somewhere else. But the theme of like being given this gift of power and then being abandoned. So I think that this could be part of this too, where we're giving some kind of raise in social status or a gift, but it may be like a crown of thorns, where there's a catch and there's maybe something given that's taken back. And also, but eventually there's a positive outcome, because Dionysus finds Ariadne on this island and is able to, it marries her. And so instead of just marrying a hero, she's marrying a god. So maybe you have the so-so thing you are given, right, is taken away, but maybe the ultimate thing is given later. So I think that's one thing that we could see with this. What else? What do you think?
when you said that story, and I know I'm connecting another myth, but I think it's interesting. I thought of the story of Medea. I've always
Hmm.
pronounced that right.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, of like, because like Jason kind of did the same thing, except for she like had magic and like helped him. And then he was like, never mind, I'm gonna go marry the princess, like have fun. And thinking about this idea of regeneration, that then she kills her children in this to prevent them to having this bad like life. And then just that final exit of her on this sort of chariot of dragons. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's not sort of the same, but I was just thinking about sort of those themes and next to each other and thinking about that as sort of a scorpionic tale as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's multiple myths that can kind of express some similar universal human themes. Mm,
But I love what you said, tying it back though, not to be too far out there. I love this idea of thinking about the sort of, right, like this sort of small loss we have to endure in a sense to get to the larger thing we want.
yeah.
And I feel like
Yeah.
that sometimes like the site, like feel like that's sort of how the planets work. I sometimes feel
Mhm.
like that all the time, right? Like something's like, I think this is why astrology is so beautiful, because when something happens, we can't always make sense of it, but then seeing a certain transit, we can just understand there's a process that maybe we're not sort of, we don't understand the motives. And so just even being armed with that knowledge through this next period could be very empowering when we go through the small loss and wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. Having to give something up. Like, Mars requires, right? Like always, it's associated with Mars, blood, and with, you know, sacrifice on some level as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that you're totally spot on with that. Like that if we are willing to go through that makes me think of something where in a lot of myth, to receive the ultimate reward, you had to give a portion to the gods, like, and if you didn't, that was super insulting to the gods. So I think that we have to, if we are gifted anything, we have to give over some portion to the divine and like as a sacrifice to be able to forward with whatever we're going to be doing next.
Mm-hmm.
I see that my connection, and I apologize if I'm cutting in and out here. I'm not sure what's going on with the internet today, but so it goes. Um, a couple other things to think about. And let's look at this. The real big story, I think, with this is this honest. Um, this is it's exact. I mean, it's like with, which is super, super close. I'll have to let you know how this turns out because this is exactly on my MC-IC axis. Like I've got the new moon on my IC in the 4th and the Uranus in the MC in the 10th. And I just, whatever comes to us is going to shape up our routines and our rhythms. In my family, there's my partner is coming to terms with a new, it was kind of came across unexpectedly. There was she thought she had more time for this job, and then the person that was leaving like unexpectedly just like, oh, sorry, I'm leaving in 2 weeks instead of 2.5 months. And so it's like, so it's kind of things like that where just something shocking that could potentially increase your status, but comes with a price and comes with some stress potentially. And then, but again, there's going to be some reviewing that happens as Venus is going retrograde at the end of December. So I guess what I would say is take your time with whatever comes up now. Whatever this new process is going to be, this new achemical transformative process, it's going to shake up your sense of security and stability, your daily habits, because that's the decan that Uranus is in, is the second decan of Taurus, which is shaking up your resources and your rhythms. It's all about consistent rhythms. And Uranus there is saying, you better shake those up because they've gotten stale, So I think that's could be part of what we're experiencing here as well. Any thoughts about the additional thoughts about the Uranus opposition within this new moon, CV?
Um, no, I was really feeling how you put that, of like having our routines being shaken up, and like I know that that's like this for me, Uranus is in my 10th house.
Hmm.
And so, right, like I'm in a relationship and like dealing with someone else. And I feel like the same thing where like my whole yeah, my sort of life axis right now, as you are, right, happening in these big through lines, is being shaken up. And it's really easy to want to just fight it, right? To like throw our arms up and be like, ah. But I think that knowing Uranus is there is a good like reminder of like, okay, like this is being shaken up for a reason, right? And I think Uranus, sometimes we think of just like Uranus as being a bomb that goes off in a chart, and we're all supposed to like duck and hide and hope that we don't have to do anything.
Right.
But this idea of like really questioning of like, okay, like how have my routines gotten stale? How like is this new thing in my life asking me to like change, to pivot to this new direction, right? Because understanding that change is actually not that exciting. It's kind of painful and messy and hurts a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing that's coming up with all this is uh viewing yourself in a different way.
Yeah.
Like when you're faced with these changes, sometimes we get stuck in these old narratives about who and what we are in our relationships. I mean, I think it's really funny that a lot of it's for the two of us is coming through partnership, because I do think Scorpio does have some significations with partnership, especially the second decan, where, like I said, Austin Coppock like talks about circuits of exchange,
Yeah.
like where we're coming together to distill an essence. We're exchanging emotional energy to be able to, and resources to be able to distill something into its purest form. But he also talks about we can exchange poisons, and it's not always a healthy exchange. One thing I wrote down and thought was like, like sort of like energy vampires, where we get these like, we get in these relationships that sometimes are draining to us as well. And
Yeah.
I think that we got to be careful of that with this new moon. That whatever new types of intimate exchanges that we get involved in aren't draining us of our vital essence and our life force. And that's my one big caution with this new moon, especially with as Mr. Hindsight was pointing out, like this is the Via Combusta, it's the fallen moon, so it may not feel like we're being given the type of nurturing that we are most comfortable with. It may be one that's like consuming us on some level too, because the moon also can consume as well as grow. Like
Yeah.
it goes through those phases of waxing and waning. So I think that a way to deal with this on some level is to just be aware of the intimate unions that you are agreeing to and trying to maintain a healthy sense of autonomy within those partnerships without getting into like codependency or into exchanges where someone's influence on you is maybe not the best for you, right? We could be pursuing something that is very different than what is healthy. Um, so I think that at the same time, if you're presented with um, I don't know, reflective story that may be limiting to you, that is keeping you in that stuck Taurus way, right?
You know
I
what this
think
makes me
that
think of? Sorry,
yeah,
fine.
go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt you.
no, go.
You you paused for a moment. Did you finish your thought?
Yeah, now I was leaving the pause for you.
Okay, thank you. No, you're saying that, and I was thinking like it just occurred to me that thinking about the Taurus Scorpio axis is almost like mycelium, right? So there's like the fruiting body that we see in our physical lives, right? So that's like what we experience, right? Like our day-to-day functioning, perhaps, right? Or the things that like the foods we eat or our experiences within a job and the way that sort of we physically show up in the world. But then thinking of Scorpio is that maybe emotional well-being, or like that really deep, we could say, of connecting to like ancestors too, that really deep root system that you don't always see. And that if that's damaged, to your point, then like your fruiting body is going to be damaged as well. There is that connection. And so thinking about the connection too, to sort of expand it, of like Scorpio season being a time to really understand that like here we could be somebody who has maybe in, you know, our day-to-day functions, we look like we have it together, right? Like all these things seem together, even though we're being kind of shaken up or trying to deal. But if we're in a toxic relationship, or we have, you know, ancestral trauma that's eating us alive, then it's going to start to show up. And so this is maybe the time to really focus on that work that you can't always see.
Yeah, mushrooms are the most quintessential Scorpio symbol, I think, because they're like little Marshall penises just erupting out of of the ground, right? And but their role is to break down and decompose the old forms and create the substrate that later in Taurus season will be the fertile soil. So, you know, they can't live without one another, Taurus and Scorpio. And just like any of these opposites, they're part of this whole, right? This yin yang kind of, you know, a little bit of light in the dark, you know, and they're constantly in this achemical exchange. So yeah, I really like this breakdown of Scorpio that we're going to here with this deep dive. I love hunting for mushrooms. That's something that it's a hobby of mine, like going out and foraging. And my partner and I recently found this giant, what's called hen of the woods, or maitake mushroom. It was about 7 pounds, but it was like this, like a baby. It was huge. And it's been nourishing us for like over a week now, because you can make so much stuff with it. So just a poignant symbol for Scorpio season and how beautiful that they can be. But also mushrooms can be very toxic too. So you have to be very careful. Don't just go out and eat any mushroom that you find in the woods. Some can be nourishing, like this hen of the woods. Others can be deadly poisonous. So similar thing with these exchanges that we're looking at is some are going to be really healthy. Some partnerships are good, coming together and exchanging emotional energy. Other ones might be not completely in your best interest.
And most importantly, it's not always easy to distinguish between the two.
That's yes, great point. Because there's toxic lookalikes. So you have to be really cagey. Because something could look just, but then make you super sick. So gotta psychedelics, and I think that's really the third decan of Scorpio, where it's all about this like illusion and like fantasy. It really works well. I should do a lecture on the mushrooms of Scorpio.
Yeah.
That'll be fun. So I think, you know, that's sort of my thoughts. There's the, checking out again here.
You're checking out. Am I checking out? I wonder if I should turn my video off for a minute.
For a second, I don't know.
Okay.
Where for a minute. All right. Hopefully that makes me less choppy.
Okay.
Because we're experiencing some bandwidth issues here today. So, you know, one of the things that I'm noticing in this chart is Mercury recently just went under the sun's beams at this time frame, which is called its morning set. Okay, so this is a morning star Mercury that is direct, that is speeding up towards a union with the sun. And Another astrologer I really like, Shu Yap, just really broke down the Venus for me in great depth in one of her webinars. And one of the things that I got from that is similar is there's this difference between planet when it's approaching to the sun versus separating. So there's some kind of messages that are coming to us, and we're getting this union. I think of Hermes as like enter Olympus when you're going to the direct superior phase where we're going internal, and we're not really having visible changes, but we're getting this download from the universe that's helping to bring us closer to spirit. And I think that really works well with the Scorpio archetype as well. So watch out for messages that come to you. We've got a really poignant week after this new moon happens, where Mercury and then make an exact square to Saturn. Okay. So the other part of this do not only with the opposition to Uranus, but the Mars Aquarius squares that are going to be happening over the course of this lunar cycle. So that is huge to me, because Mars is a planet that desires something. It says, I want this, I'm going to go get it. I need to take action. And Saturn's sitting there saying, no, it's a big brick wall. It's a big, slow down. It's a big, there are forces greater than you that may be putting the brakes on what you're moved towards. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I've been thinking about Saturn a lot recently, and Saturn, and Saturn, just this idea of Saturn being reality, in the sense that I know that there's parts of my life I'm constantly always trying to push against, in a sense, because perhaps maybe I have my own ideals, but Saturn saying no, this is how it is, and forcing us to work with that, which is actually how creativity is born, right? Having a constraint and having to be creative and work around it. But then thinking about sort of that energy versus that Mars that's deeply desiring something. So I feel if anything, these can be really this is a huge opportunity for growth, right? Having to figure out your desires within the framework of what's reality, right? But that can be a deeply frustrating process for a lot of people.
Yes, frustration is a great descriptive word for it, because I like what you're saying about figuring out what is possible, because Saturn is saying this is not possible. So you have to figure out what you're going to pursue within those limitations. That's nothing to really be that angry about, because just by the very fact of being incarnated into bodies, we have to come to terms with limitations. Yep. And I think with this Saturn in particular, I love the way Joy Usher talks about this Saturn in Aquarius as being the glass ceiling. It's about the limitations of our ideas, of ourselves, of society, and it's not just the physical limitations here; that it's mental. So I think that we might be up against on this week ahead is sort of these mental blocks that we have towards moving forward, but also on a societal scale as well. The idealism of what kind of boundaries and laws are we going to respect as a community to keep the structure of society functional. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I keep thinking of when you say that, right? Thinking about how these constraints, although frustrating in the moment, are ultimately helpful because they're right. They're what gives form to whatever it is we want to do, right? As opposed to Jupiter just sort of constantly expanding. And I keep thinking about the scene from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Is it Veruca Salt who explodes? I can't remember.
Is she the blueberry one?
Oh, she's the blueberry one. It's the girl with the golden hen. Which is the one that just sort of it's sort of this Jupiterian
Augustus Gloop.
Okay.
Is that is this keeps eating and
yeah, that's sort of what I think of the opposite. To me, that's if we didn't have Saturn, right? Like that's what Saturn's preventing from happening.
Well, and she's very Ionic, or she's very martial. She's like, I want this, give it to me, and she's really like
Yeah.
off-putting, you know. And then I really love the original version of that with Gene Wilder just like
Uh-huh.
smirking at children. It's sort of devious, but it's pretty funny. Um, so we may be face to face with the great castrator, as we call him. Um, and by trying to bring something into form, we're castrating those future possibilities. That's something that I've been learning from Liz Green, which is such a brilliant way of looking at Saturn. And there's an animal that an animal spirit that I
Mm,
was the hawk.
yeah.
And that seems to be such a perfect representation of Mars and Saturn in an air sign here. Mars in Scorpio, Saturn in an air sign, because a hawk is very Mars-like with its talons and its beak, and
Yeah.
it can shoot and like grab something. But a hawk is associated with very qualities. It can see from Mars. It gets that footprint. Um, Definitely hawk like we need to know where we're going before we can put it into action and like speed toward a bullet. You know what I'm saying?
No, I really love that analogy. And I was thinking now about, as you were saying that, I was thinking how, in some sense, we had this whole talk about Mars being sort of concerned with the future, right? Like what comes next? What am I creating? Or thinking about this longing for the past in a sense of decomposition, of bringing up things like memory. And that Saturn is really concerned with a present reality in a sense. I mean, it is old age, but this idea
Yes.
of like, it's the one, it's based in a certain reality that Mars is not.
I love that because another thing that Liz Green uses with her myth about Saturn
Yeah.
is illustration of future possibilities into form,
Yeah.
but also of the children do observe the present, right?
Yeah.
Or and eliminate being usurped by his future. Like so it was. I think even Saturn and Aquarius on some level too. I just think Aquarius is one of the most understood, because I do think it is. Still sort of conservative. I know that word is like loaded and stuff, but any Saturn's going to be quote unquote conservative in the most fundamental meaning of the sense necessarily, because sure, it says, what are we going to concretize into reality? What are we going to, that Saturn is that skeletal system. And when you have Saturn in an air sign, it's all about the skeletal system and our idealism, right? The society together. Because a lot of society is just that we've made. It's not just always physical structures. It's like, oh, well, we'll respect this law. We're going to respect this interaction, right?
Mm-hmm. I think another word for that maybe is sober. To me, Saturn feels very
Mm,
sobering. It's constantly, whereas like
yeah.
Jupiter is idealism, or Saturn is constantly bringing you down to the like sort of yes or no. Can we do this? Right?
Yep.
Will it pass the test?
Yeah. And this new moon, your ability to move forward is probably going to be tested, whether it's practical or whether it can be manifested within that, Saturnian Aquarius. Uh, and like you said, just circling back to the frustration energy, there was this as perfecting too, wasn't it? When I believe Mars was in Aries and Saturn was in Capricorn, where we had kind of a foot on the brake type of energy,
Yep.
and now
Yep.
it's in a fixed sign. where we might even be even more stubborn and set in our ways. Like, energy last year was we were trying to initiate things with the cardinal sign, but now it's kind of like how we, you know, letting go. So that's
It
go ahead.
is it hard to hear me because you're breaking up again? I don't know if it's my.
Bummer. No, you're fine. I'm hearing you totally fine. It's probably completely on my end. So
Okay.
I apologize, everyone out. My internet's being super crappy. Maybe what I'll do at the end of this is I do have an audio recording.
Okay.
Is probably clear, so I might be able to replace the audio on YouTube later. But if you're listening to this and you're missing some things, I also post these on Sound. If you want to go back and listen to some important, that clear, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. The other thing I see here is after the new moon, Venus is heading into Capricorn. They're going to have the retrograde at the end of December. So some of the themes are going to start coming up that we're going to be dealing with that retrograde. And I recorded a long podcast with Melissa LaFara and Shu Yap about the upcoming Venus retrograde that's going to be released on November the 1st on Melissa LaFara's Energetic Principles. Excuse me, check that out if you want a deep dive on grade. But pay attention to the themes that come up with the area of your life, because there may be some reviews that's the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we go through kind of the process here, Mercury is going to join with Mars and the Sun, and eventually conjoin with Mars and then square Saturn exactly both and 11th.
Yeah.
Be careful that your desire some kind of defeat, because this decan of Scorpio, hungry, desiring something, feeling grief over what lost, and then that first decan of Aquarius is defeat, where you're cast into exile because of some kind of litigation. Mm-hmm. So the combination of Mercury, I would say, be careful with your words, to get into like a nasty fight at the time. You're probably going to, lose, like, if that makes sense. Go tuck your tail between your legs and go off into the frontier, and I don't think anybody really wants that on some level. What else? Then on the 11th, we have the square, the first quarter square.
Mm-hmm.
And there, it really coincides with that Mercury-Mars kind of square. But this one's in second decan of sort of traveling between worlds. It's a 6 of Swords. Yeah. So like we to me, this one is sort of like attachment versus detaching, the challenges of moving, where we're really having nostalgia from the past, but have a real need to move on from that past. So just be careful around that period of time that you don't get lost in memory, and keep your eye on like that Hawkeye on. And that's leading up to moves that we're seeing on the 19th with in Taurus and Scorpio, right on Algol. And I'll do another live stream on come up probably midweek rather than the end of the week, because I don't want to do eclipse. That would be bad.
Yeah.
Just be careful not to head with this one. I guess that's my main thought. That with moon, patience is required around this time. You have to kind of wait for it to manifest. Any initial thoughts on the eclipse seasons that we're in here?
Wow, this is do we have two more eclipses on the Sagittarius Gemini axis? I was looking up this morning.
Yeah, this is the um, we have the December 4th new moon solar eclipse at 12 degrees of Sag, and then I think that the nodes switch after that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's going to be a kind of big deal because it's in what's another 18-month cycle in a different part of your chart. So feeling about that this eclipse is sort of perhaps wrapping something up.
Yeah, for sure. This is some kind of ending in the Scorpio Taurus axis.
Mhm.
Well, actually, yeah, it's strange because the actual sun and moon is in Scorpio, but it's the last eclipse with the nodes over
Yeah.
Gemini and Sagittarius. So I'd have to meditate on that aspect of it a little bit more. But I think what we find the North Node in South Sagittarius is diversify our belief system and take in other people's perspective than getting fixated on our own beliefs. Um, and I know that's been true. Like there's been a lot of opinions that have been floating around, and trying to see things from a different perspective has been important. And we're going to see the North Node move into Taurus, where it's going to be important to down some roots, some growth, build new structures. There's infrastructure things happening coming up. I think it's a building phase we're going to be going through on some level, which is exciting. As honestly, I'm pretty excited about that nodal shift.
I feel like that's a whole webinar for you.
Yeah, right. Could be for sure. All right, so I'm going to stop this share here. I want to talk a little bit just
Sure.
about
Let's attempt for videos back on maybe. Should we do
yeah,
that?
let's try it. Let's see what we got here. There we are.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about the technical difficulties today, friends. I don't know what's going on with the internet here, but it's been kind of stormy lately here, so I don't know if that is affecting what's going on in my area. But the I Ching that I got for this new moon in Scorpio 2 was number 60, which translates to limitation, control, restriction, separation and distinction, constraint, self-control, which I think fits really well with the Mars-Saturn square that is the dominant aspect of this lunation. And it's changing to number 39, which is called obstruction, limping, stumbling, adversity, impediments. So pretty funny seeing how that is turning out. There's 3 changing lines. And all of these changing lines really talk about leaving your home and going out into the world, into public. And the first one says, not going out of the door into the courtyard, no blame. So the first line that says, we would like to push ahead, but there's too many obstacles, the square with Saturn. So exercise restraint and discretion, be realistic, gather resources, bide your time. There was notes that talked about maintaining your silence and self-control. Line number 2 says, not going out of the courtyard, misfortune. So that's actually almost the opposite advice that they gave in the previous line. Yeah. So I think that there's going to be limits. I always look at the I Ching as a story going from the bottom lines up to the top. So we have limits, right? And we have to come to terms with that and prepare. That's what I like about the I Ching. They talk about the preparation phases when we're experiencing blockages. And I think that's important. But then when the moment comes, you have to be able to act on it. Like there will be a moment, I think, during this cycle that you do have to take some action after the obstacles are presented to you. So I guess don't hesitate. Moment comes, really respect the right moment and seize it like a hawk would, swooping down and seizing prey. Like, because if you miss your opportunity, you're gonna go hungry, And then the last line says no limitation. It says no limitation, then lamentation, but no blame. So if we don't respect the limits of Saturn, we may, if we lack some self-control, we may get into some conflicts. We may go a little bit too far, but maybe it's better to like err on the side of, I don't know, going too far than just not doing anything, right? Not
Yeah.
leaving the past behind. But I was thinking about this, about learning from our past mistakes and finding balance. Um, did that bring up any reflections?
It makes me think of something that a theme that I've been thinking about for a while now, and going into this new moon opposite Uranus, a theme that I've been thinking of that I really came up for me when you were talking about Uranus is this sort of shake up in our routines or shake up in our lives. And I think that like, especially like I tend to see a lot of clients like back to back. And one of the main like stories that keeps coming up is there's something in their life that's frustrating them and they just want it to change, right? And this is so easy, right? Well, if I could just change this thing, then my attitude towards it will be better. And I think part of this transit is understanding, like, even though it's not easy, we're always empowered. That sometimes if that thing, like hitting your head against a wall, right, the wall is not going to go away. Like this should
Right.
be a sign that maybe there's another way to look at this. Maybe I do need to change my routine. Maybe I need to change my attitude towards it, because clearly these waves keep coming. This thing's not changing. And it's so simple. And maybe that's frustrating advice to give to people, but I think it's something we can all sort of sit with during these transits.
I really love that because, you know, that really speaks to the Tao. If there is an external thing that you can't change, you can change the internal
Yeah.
state that you have towards it, right? There's always an opportunity for change, even if that change is acceptance and taking a new perspective. You know, that's a great segue to thinking about how the I Ching deals with obstructions. And
Yeah.
really, you can think about it as a giant boulder in the path of a stream, and you have to become like water. You build up strength to be able to eventually spill around the obstacle, right? And then maybe that strength is going internal and like having a new perspective, having emotional fortitude, changing your perspective so that you can take a slightly different path. You're not going to, you know, crush the boulder. It's still going to be there. You just have to, you know, gather with others too sometimes and gather collective strength to pour across and around a thing,
Yeah.
around an obstacle. Yeah,
That's
go
no,
ahead.
that's perfect. I don't know if you intentionally did this, but right, like thinking about again, Taurus, that fixed earth energy of literally like being the boulder in our lives, the things we can't change. And like going back to that again, that analogy of the Scorpio, the waters that you not necessarily see, like focusing on that deeper level to fortify our consciousnesses, or fortify our emotional
Mm,
well-being so that we can deal with the literal boulders perhaps Taurus puts in our way.
yeah,
Uranus via Taurus.
it's perfect, isn't it? It's like, and surprising sometimes how that turns out, right? Um, Beatrice was asking when the nodes shift into um, into Taurus, and I am taking a look at this here. I'm trying to find this here. The Do you know the date on that, CV? When the exact nodal
I
transition
don't
is?
know.
Because it's just my program is being weird about it. I think it's at the beginning of 2022 though. I
Yeah.
think that's the, you know, we're heading pretty close to that coming up here. I can find it for all of you. I it's in January. I could be wrong, but I will find this here. Um, while I'm clicking through to find the Taurus thing here, make sure that if you're enjoying this channel, you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to make a donation to the work that we're doing here today, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. So the nodal shift happens on January 19th, 2022, which is very close to the time that Venus is going to go direct as well. So there's going to be changes that we're going to be able to start taking action on towards the end of January, I think. I think there's a reflective period from December through January. But then we're going to see some movement towards February, March, and once Jupiter's into Pisces and things like that, there's going to be a lot, I think, more movement within that. So looking forward to that as well. So try to think like the hawk this new moon. What is your long-term vision? And even if you can't take every single action towards the vision, you can still know where you're going, and you can clear the decks so that you actually have room to move forward, and you have, you've released the burdens that you've been carrying with you mentally or physically. So I think this is a liberation lunation as well.
Last thing I just was thinking about, to tie it back into the Mars area versus Mars Scorpio, right? And I think maybe perhaps Mars in Scorpio is inviting us to do like the deep emotional, maybe behind the scenes work that's completely necessary before we can have that like Aries just like burst out into the world. Like, so thinking about like within our own projects or whatever it is that we're starting our plans and being like careful with ourselves, it like, so doing that like back end work might be more emotionally taxing. It might be like a slower process. But to understand that it's okay if it doesn't look like the sort of Aries jump into the world, Mars.
Yeah, behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
Behind the scenes work, I think, is going to be important, and especially with Mercury being under the beams as well. So, all right. One last thing I want to do is that Mars as well is going to be under the beams and is under the beams and is going to be emerging as a morning star on the 22nd of November. So that's going to be a big moment too, in relationship potentially to what we uncover in this lunation cycle as well. So that's when we may see some of the things that we've been gestating, like you were saying, behind the scenes, finally starting to take flight like a great. So about what I've got.
I hope you come back. Are you there? Oh, you're frozen.
Am I not? Am I frozen? Oh
Yeah,
no.
let me turn my video off to say goodbye. That was wonderful, Spencer. I hope we don't have as many technical difficulties next time we speak.
We always have something, don't
Yeah.
for Instagram. Well, anyway, we'll be able to hear this on the recording later. So I wanted to thank CV for being here today, and I'll stop my video here. Thank you all for your comments in the chat, and we will we'll see you the next time. Hopefully, I'll see you all in the Decans of Scorpio workshop. And yeah, visit C at artofthezodiac.co. And we will see you the next time, my friend. Take care.
Bye.